to introduce the mastermind behind this series. In the middle of your picture, Dendi Braken, my colleague, impact expert, who has worked many years in this space and is helping IFB quite a bit on this. And the other guest of honor today is Cristel Dumas. And Cristel is associate professor at ICHEC, one of the business schools here in Brussels. And apart from that, Cristel wears multiple hats in the impact finance space. So she has different angles of knowledge and experience, which is very useful for us. I'll get to what they'll do in a second. For those who don't know IFB yet, I wanted to show one or two slides. And the first one is coming up about IFB, Impact Finance Belgium. Voilà, there you see the screen. No, the video. I now see a lot of people. So there's a screen with an overview of our members. I want to say that IFB is a membership organization. We started last year in Brussels, aiming to bring together the finance sector in Belgium. Voilà, there's the picture at least. Yeah. With the members as per 1 January, it's a growing organization. We're almost 40 members large, grouping all the parts of the impact finance space, really ranging from what we call engaged grant making to the very commercial funding, from very small players to very large players. And we aim to bring them in to jointly achieve more impact finance, to achieve more effective impact finance, and to achieve that this is being done where it matters most. So it's deeper than just more. In order to do this, we need this wide range of parties with experience and parties with ambition. We are a small team downtown Brussels at the Impact House. Some of you may know it. Feel free to check impacthouse.be for lots of events and our partner organizations in this building. The small team tries to do many things for our membership group, and that ranges from helping introduce, clarify lots of standards, rules, definitions, and tools in the space, and that's one of the main themes for today. We're looking at different products that are being offered or that could be developed jointly in order to get to the more effective impact finance. Bringing our members together helps them to exchange, to collaborate, and really also share their ambition and jointly work on items. And sometimes they are competitors, but in this space, we notice a lot of willingness of people to share experiences, which is wonderful to jointly grow this big space. Our main focus is inside Belgium, but we're not doing this alone. Outside Belgium, we have similar organizations that we can call our friends or siblings in different constituencies. There's a group of over 10 organizations across Western Europe doing similar work, what we're doing in Belgium, in mainly countries around us. We learn quite a bit from them, and we work with them as well. You can imagine, quite a few of you will know about SFDR, CSRD as a recent example. European Commission is moving in this space, and then it's better to team up and have one big voice instead of all national voices. These are just a few examples of what we do. I'm not reading out all the text on the left. On the next page, I'm not going to read out all that text either, but I did want to highlight a few points. How finance can be used as a force for good. That sounds maybe a bit lofty, but the whole goal is that financiers start thinking about the role they can play instead of just following their clients, to also invite them to think broader than just the business case, broader than just the financial returns, to really see how they can contribute to societal issues, be it environmental or social. And there are surprisingly many good examples. It's not always easy, and there are lots of questions around it, and it's new to some, but it's amazing what is happening already, and obviously that's what we want to stimulate and see how we can grow this. You see an ambition of impact as part of the overall market, which we identified as assets under management, the AUM, or by 2030, that we hope that the impact slice will grow to at least 10%. We are in discussions about the exact definitions, what's in there, but it's more about the direction where we want to go, make sure that the financial sector is inspired and helped to go there. Now, at the bottom, you see a few keywords of how we do this. and with some examples, policy related. We started doing some of it, may take a bit longer. We started bringing parts of our membership group together with overlapping interests. You can imagine institutions, typically the more larger players. We have players with specific sector focus or product focus that we're bringing together. A few things we'll be doing later in the year or next year, where topics like demand, link, foundations, or others, where we're really eager to bring them into the space as well. These are just a few examples. There's a lot going on. The very first one on that list is about the rules and the tools and the standards, and that'll be the topic of today. Wendy, who is in your screen, released on behalf of IFB a report last year, 8 November, on the second Belgian Impact Day on this topic. We got a lot of traction, a lot of requests to use that information, a lot of parties who asked for more clarification. Wendy has done some of the roadshows already, and we thought it's better to also do this in an online, very low threshold version. So that's the background to today. We were not alone in this. We really consulted members, other groups around us, including academics. And that's where Cristel comes in with sometimes a very different and fresh view into the space that's very important to us. Over the next 45 minutes, you will first see one, I call it the teaser page by Cristel, who did analysis from a different angle and shows how nicely our theme of today fits in. And then we'll have both Wendy talking for 15 minutes and then Cristel talking for 15 minutes. And if we all stick to our time, then we have about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end, where all of you are invited to join in as well. Again, my email address is frederick@impactfinance.pe. If you have any questions, please send them to me and I'll collect them here. And with that, I'll pass the floor to Cristel. Who's muted? Voilà.
Since impact finance is a field that's growing so much and changing so much, there are lots of parallel conversations going on, and you may wonder, what are people discussing elsewhere? What are people worried about or curious about when they try to understand and advance impact finance? So here we have a helpful study in an academic paper that identified 8 parallel conversations that are going on now in academia and in practice around impact finance. It's interesting to look at them because you'll see that you're actually going to have some of these conversations in the upcoming IFB webinars. So just to highlight them, the number one conversation that seems to be going on is how do we scale up the scaling of impact investing? Second conversation, which we'll address today already, is understanding impact investors' characteristics and intentions. Who are they? How can they collaborate? Next come what are the enabling factors for impact investing instruments? There's another conversation on the right strategies to promote impact investments. One on the innovative models and frameworks for sustainable development, these business models that should be supported by impact investors. Then a whole conversation on the huge challenge of measuring impact. One on the challenge of effective implementation of strategies promoting impact investing, and about the innovative models and frameworks for sustainable development. So I think many of the conversations we see here confirm how it's really a field that is attempting to grow and to professionalize itself, to institutionalize itself. So let's have one of these conversations together today, maybe see a little clearer on this, and then we'll have meetings in the coming months to discuss the other topics. Wendy, I'll turn my mic on and off, and you can turn yours on.
Okay. Do you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Cristel, for highlighting all those different challenges. Like Cristel also said, some of those challenges we will address today, mainly the second one. The challenges mainly related to impact measurement and management will be addressed in the upcoming webinars. So if you're interested in that topic, do not hesitate to join us. And also the challenge number 7 on effective implementation of strategies, we would like to refer to our publication that we launched in November. So that's a little bit the answer already on those challenges. For today, the topic is on the distinction between ESG and impact investing and the overview of the different practices. I hope that Hani can also show me my slide for the definitions, because when we ask impact investors if they invest in impact, we get a lot of different answers. And those answers we can mainly divide in two big approaches. You have the ESG investors, and you have the impact investors according to the definition of the GIN, so the General Network of Impact Investors. The ESG investors, they invest in companies that have demonstrating a willingness to improve their performance in environment, social, and governance. The impact investors, according to the GIN definition, they invest with intention to generate positive, measurable social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. You see, in both approaches, they focus on environment and social, and that makes those definitions sometimes very confusing. In the next slide, and with the next figure, we want to highlight the difference between ESG and impact investing. But before going into detail on those in this figure, we wanted to explain also the situation and the context where all those two approaches emerged. So it was early 2000 when we all came aware that our behavior and our activities had a negative harm on the environment and also sometimes on the social aspect, although this came later. And this was also the case for impact organizations and impact investors. They came aware that a lot of traditional economy or traditional organizations are doing harm to the environment. And by coming aware, they said, okay, we want to at least know what is the negative harm that we cause. And that's why they start looking at what are the different negative aspects related to environment and social aspects. With looking and stressing on avoiding harm, they also developed little by little different strategies to reduce that harm. So to reduce the negative impact that it caused. In the first stage, that was related to their organization. In the second stage, it was more that they also went to look at the value chain, so their broader value chain, for instance, for their suppliers, where they looked at how negative the impact, how they can reduce their negative impact. Within the organizations, they're looking mostly to their input, so to the resources that they use, to the production, so to their activities, so how do they produce their service and products, and also the negative harm of their products and services that they create. So ESG, so in the first and the second circle, what's mainly the ESG approach of the ESG organizations where ESG investors invest in, they're focusing mainly on the processes internally in the organization. So they're looking at the transition that an organization of a company can make to become less harmful in the future. A second approach was that they didn't say we are going to make a transition happening within our company. If we want to have really a sustainable economy, we really need to find other solutions for our production. And that are the impact organizations or impact investors who invested in those impact organizations. They were looking mainly for solutions for the societal problems that we encounter. For instance, in that period, you get a lot of attention for solar energy, wind turbines. So that was a production of an alternative production of energy, what wasn't there before. So those impact organizations and those impact investors were not only looking, they were not looking at the processes within their organization. They were looking out for solutions that they can provide to the society to have a more sustainable economy. So their focus was mainly outside to the society. So, and that is the main distinction that we make between ESG companies, investors, and impact investors. As companies and organizations evolve, also did our impact investors, and that is the next slide. Yeah, and there you see that also there were different evolutions going on. And if you look at, for instance, the asset managers and the banks who were traditional, also always the investors, they mainly looked in the beginning at companies who were just wanted to be aware of their negative impact. Little by little, and by means of engagements and by means of discussions with the organizations where they invest in, they were more focusing on that companies would have a transition plan, and so that they would reduce their harm. And little by little, you see also that those traditional investors, like asset managers and banks, they're also get interested in impact investing, and they're really looking at impact organizations where they can invest in. So they came in fact, from the left side to more to the center and to the right side. Impact funds, they went from the other side. So they started with investing in impact organizations, and within an impact organization, in those impact organizations, we were addressing mainly the societal issues. And when those impact organizations became larger, also impact funds started to request to those organizations that they looked also to their practices related to environment and social issues, so that they're not only looking at the impact that they provide to the society, but that they also that they reduce the harm that they maybe could cause with their production. So they come from the right side to the left side. And then you still another group, and amongst our members, and that are the institutional and actors and the insurance companies. They, in fact, they always ask their organizations or companies where they invest in that they do an ESG analysis, but they also invest sometimes in impact companies. So they have investments on the left side and on the right side. So that is the evolution that's going on. But I also wanted to highlight that we, from Impact Finance Belgium, both impacts are very, very fine, because we think that they're complementary. It's not that we only need the left side or the right side. Both are needed to make our society more sustainable. If you want to know if a company or an investor is more interested in ESG or impact, then the next slide or the next decision tree can help you.
Wendy, your microphone's off.
Strange. Again, I see. Yeah, if you want to understand sometimes the discussion going on within the impact investors or in the companies that they invest in, and if you want to make a distinguish between the ESG or impact, then you can see, then you hear like different discussions, or you can distinguish different discussions. The first discussion that you will hear is about materiality. A lot of companies, they will look at single materiality still, and that means that they're looking at the possible environmental events that can cause negative harm for their risk, for their financial returns. So they are looking at what can environmental events can have as a negative impact on their return. Double materiality is also that they not only look to the financial consequences, but that they also consider the negative effect that they have on companies, on the environment. So that's the discussion about materiality, what's often going on in those companies. Another discussion that you will hear is that if they have to make a selection between environmental issues or social issues, or sometimes they address both, and then they talk about sustainability that they want to address. For all those different approaches, you have like principles, standards, labels, tools, and metrics. I'm not going to go in detail on those principles and standards. All those are described in the report that Frederik mentioned before, so you're welcome to consult this and read it there. On the impact side, the discussion will be more on the methods or the ways that they can measure their impact and how they can manage it. So, and also for there, you have like different approaches. You have the qualitative approach and you have a quantitative approach. If you go in the quantitative approach, you also have a subgroup who's more focusing on valuation, on monetization. In fact, it's translating their impact in monetary values, so in euros or in dollars. And also there you have some approaches. I'm not also going into detail on those different methods. That is in fact the topic of webinar 3 that we will that we organize in May. So if you want more want to have more information on that topic, do not hesitate neither to join us on that occasion. So that's what I wanted to explain about the different definitions and the different approaches. And now I am happy to pass the word to Cristel, who will give us more insight on the difference between the different impact investors.
So if we can have the next slide, what you've heard here maybe helped you identify where your own organization stands, or where organizations that you collaborate with or who are your clients position themselves. We were also wondering, beyond these different types of organizations doing impact or ESG, what about the individuals? Because as you know, in very large organizations, you have individuals with different positions on impact, and some may be driving the organization to change faster. And so we conducted a study with my colleagues Marie Cudon of ULB and Gilles Solé to try to understand the profile of the individuals in Belgium doing impact investments. And I'll present here the preliminary results. It's not a published study yet, but it gives us some very useful insight, I think, to understand our field and the way it's constructed today. What we did is we surveyed individuals in Belgium who considered themselves as experts in impact investment. Maybe some of you received the survey and answered it. And we had answers from 85 experts. We asked them to organize statements from what they believed most to what they disagreed most with. And they had to organize these statements in a pyramid, which is what you see here. In the center, statements that you feel pretty indifferent to, and you could put a majority of statements there. On the right, statements that you strongly agreed with, but you can't agree with everything. You were limited to the number of statements you could put there. And on the left, statements that you strongly disagree with. Again, you could not strongly disagree with everything. Because of the pyramid shape, respondents had to prioritize their positions or their beliefs. And this exercise led us to identify some key standardized profiles of institutional investors, not institutional, of impact investors or impact investment profiles in Belgium. So we had different sectors answering: the public sector, NGOs, the financial sector, etc., and people from many different ages. What we got as results, and we see them on the next slide, is, as I said, 3 different profiles. When I made this presentation previously, somebody said, oh, this is like the MBTI of impact investment. And in a way it is, because you could probably recognize yourself in one of these profiles. A first standard profile are people who are really motivated by a sense of urgency and feel like impact is urgent and must be done now. Second profile is people who are motivated by the business case of sustainable finance and how impact investment fits in that business case. And the third profile is people who are motivated by engagement policies with companies and the importance of changing corporate governance of the system. Let's take a look at each of these profiles. And while you listen, maybe you can identify yourself to one of these profiles, or maybe identify clients or partners that you're having trouble interacting with. And this may help you understand where they come from and what is important for them. People who are motivated by the sense of urgency to do sustainable finance see that, or think that, impact is possible as well on social and environmental issues, and they can be combined. They think sustainable finance is definitely going to become something larger in the future. They believe in the scaling up. And they think an important role of sustainable finance, and I won't repeat it every time, but it's also impact investment, is to help launch innovations, new technologies, new solutions to address societal and environmental challenges. What the problems that they identify is that they think the financial industry is really not doing its job currently, not fulfilling its role, and that regulators have not fulfilled their role too. It doesn't mean maybe more regulation, but probably more targeted regulation. They have strong beliefs on the defense sector, that it cannot be part of sustainable finance, and they consider it acceptable to have below market returns for impact investment. This is different from people who have a profile 2, who don't think that there's too much greenwashing in impact investments. They also believe the strong role or important role of impact investments to launch innovations, a focus on new technologies to solve today's problems. And they think that sustainable finance is a solution to address inequalities. And, the environmental aspect is important, but it's not going to hurt the social aspect and inequalities if you do sustainable finance. For them, the key problem is the quality of ESG data, the lack of data or the poor quality of the data. They have strong beliefs about the nuclear power and gas sector, which they think should be included or should be allowed in sustainable finance products. And they also have strong beliefs on profit. They think it is not acceptable to have below market returns, that sustainable finance funds should have the same level of profitability as non-sustainable funds. Finally, they see the negative screening, so excluding companies or sectors from your portfolio as a good strategy, not something of the past, but they see impact investment as the strategy of the future. Finally, if we look at profile 3, so these are individuals who do impact investment or sustainable finance because they're motivated by fixing the governance. They see the G of ESG as just as important as the strong focus we've been giving to environment and sometimes to the social aspects. They think that we really need a coherence between the governance of institutions and their products, their services, their practices. Because of that, they have a strong belief that sustainable finance cannot be achieved by unsustainable institutions. And so they need this coherence between what the company or the bank does and what it sells. For this group of people, the finance industry workers are not fulfilling their mission to develop sustainable finance, so they see a responsibility there. And they think there's a real lack of incentives, of diversity and knowledge among executive boards in companies. And so they see working on a better board composition, board remuneration as a key aspect or a problem to solve first. They also have strong positions like Group 1 on the defense sector, which they think cannot be part of sustainable finance. And they have strong beliefs in terms of methodologies, strategies to do investments. For them, passive funds are not an option. They're not compatible with the impact that we want to have. So tracking indices, for example, are not a possibility. These are the 3 profiles that emerge. As I mentioned, these are still preliminary results, so we still need to dig into each of these profiles, meet people who have these profiles and understand their motivations better. I think what's very interesting in looking at these profiles is that it's supposed to allow better communication between the different profiles. We are not at all saying that one profile is better than the other or more important than the other, but there are different roles to play among these different actors. Some actors may help really move large institutions and help the scaling up. Other actors may help develop new innovative practices or investment tools, and other actors may help create a level playing field or address more systemic blockages and changes that need to be made. A word maybe to zoom into one of these actors on your profile, if you were profile 1, for example. If we can have the next slide, you'll see the ideal type answers of somebody who actually has a profile 1 and who filled in the survey. What you see here is the pyramid. It's inverted in this case, but from -3 is I strongly disagree with this statement to +3, I strongly agree with this statement. And this is not a person's answers. This is the result of the quantitative analysis and analysis of correlations between statements. So it's really the ideal type of a profile 1 and what they would have answered. Maybe we shouldn't focus so much in column 0 because these are the statements that this profile has no strong opinions about, but very strong opinions in -3, as I mentioned. They think that most sustainable finance funds are greenwashing, so there's a real lack of trust there and insatisfaction on what is done. That in the future, sustainable finance projects will mainly be large-scale So they disagree that they'll be small scale. So they agree they would be large scale, right? And they think that they don't think the digitalization of finance is antithetical to sustainable finance. So they see digitalization as a real answer or a possibility to do sustainable finance. Last focus just on column 3 to understand what profile 1 investors in sustainable finance strongly believe. So I'm looking at the very last column. They gave 3 points to the fact that sustainable finance should explicitly define and deliver positive environmental, social impact. And there we're really in the definition Wendy gave us of the impact investing practice. They strongly believe sustainable finance helps launch innovations that address societal and environmental challenges, and that quality ESG is key to sustainable investment. They don't disagree with that. It's a real problem for people with profile 2 who say we need to work on that, but nobody disagrees on the importance of ESG data and information to be able to value things properly. So maybe one of you out there says, "Oh, this is my answer, or this is the pyramid I filled in." I think this is a helpful and interesting reminder that there are other pyramids out there, other profiles out there that compose the Belgian market of impact investing, and with whom you may want to collaborate, gather together, for example, in Impact Finance Belgium, because in Impact Finance Belgium's platform, you actually have a coexistence of all these different actors. And it's an opportunity there as well to get to know each other, to share the different objectives with each, and who knows, maybe to co-finance projects with these different objectives in mind.
All right. Thank you, Cristel, for this interesting contribution, taking back to the human level, who we are, and how we look at all these, of course, at anonymous level. I see 2 things. On the one hand, I have a number of questions in my email, and some of these I'll share. I also see that we are actually ahead of time, so that's good. My worry was the opposite, so we have time for more questions. So I actually wanted to check with Honey if the chat could be opened, because that's always easier if people would have questions. I hope that, yeah, technically I see nodding, so that's possible. That's a good sign. But I'm just taking a few here, and I'm not sure, not everybody says whether it's for Wendy or for Cristel. SFDR, CSRD, how is this going to change or impact your presentations? Fairly open question. Wendy or Cristel?
So you said the question is, how is it going to impact our presentations?
Somebody's asking, yeah, is asking like, how will SFDR and CSRD change the theory and the practice?
Okay, not the different discussions we're going to have in the future. Okay, well, one thing that comes out from what everybody agrees on is the importance of data to take the right investment decisions, to be able to advance and scale up the practice. We need information. So these are regulations that are really that have as an objective to improve transparency and provide better data. In that sense, it's probably going to make things easier from an investor perspective because you'll have the right data. Now, maybe I don't know if we're addressing an investor's question or entrepreneur's question or company's question. The other side of the coin is how difficult it is to gather, to collect that data, how time-consuming and expensive it is. So that's probably a reality that's dealt with by the other side of the coin.
Yeah. That's usually my contribution there as well. On the one hand, it will be a challenge to see how to properly do all this because it's new to many parties, including new to the Commission. But I think just as important will be just the processes that this will trigger with the financiers and entrepreneurs, because looking for other types of info points will hopefully make them also more aware of what they're doing, whether financier or entrepreneur. But all to be seen. But it's something we're keeping a close eye on as IFB, and we do this in conjunction with what I sometimes call the other IFBs around us. They have all different names and abbreviations, but doing similar work in other countries, and other organizations like Impact Europe are helping us also in this space.
If I may add,
Frederick,
go ahead.
Yeah, what I just wanted to also add is that you see a sort of difference between single materiality and double materiality. With the CSRD, in fact, they are stressing the importance of double materiality. So that will become also more mainstream after some years. So there's also not only will be more data, but also the bar will be lifted up to going more to the second circle instead of the first circle that I wanted to add.
And it's actually a specialty of impact investors who've been doing that well before mainstream investors have been doing it with theories of change or other methodologies. There's probably a lot to learn as well from impact investors on how to collect that data meaningfully and as a strategic exercise and not just a reporting exercise.
Yeah. Different question. To Cristel, your profiles are really interesting. Do you have any insight into who are behind these profiles? Are there gender aspects, age aspects, other backgrounds? Do you know anything about the people who filled this in, or are you not able to share this?
So the survey was anonymous. We do have gender aspects, and we don't have any significant results for the moment. So I can't tell you one group is young and one group has more experience. That doesn't seem to appear. There's no perfect fit either with the institution in which people work. I can't tell you group so-and-so is big banks or people working in big banks, and the other group is people working in NGOs. That was really interesting and intriguing in the sense that within one same organization, you have different types of profiles. So I share your frustration. I'd like to know more about the people who are behind that, which is why we'd like a second phase to this study where we would actually present the three pyramids, as I've showed you one, to people and say, oh, which one do you recognize yourself in? What does this mean for you?
Okay. And somebody else asked, and this is a little bit linked to it, Cristel, you presented three profiles. Wendy, you presented three circles. Can we relate these? Or can all the profiles be found in every circle?
I love that question. We definitely have to look into that. We don't have a passion for number three. So my three profiles are the result of statistic calculations. I had three statistically relevant results. That just happens to be there. So that's why I have three profiles. I think profile 2, in my case, are probably people coming from Wendy's ESG circle and moving towards impact. For the 2 other profiles, maybe profile 1 comes more from the small impact circle and moving towards ESG, and yet I'm not sure about that. That's the kind of thing we would have to check. And then profile 3 is a mystery to me. If any of you recognize yourself in there, I'd love to hear about it. I have the impression this is more maybe platforms, associations that want to change the field, but I'm not sure where they would fit, Wendy, in your 3 circles.
Yeah, I think also we have to look at closer together because we're also we did an impact needs assessment with the different impact investors, and that's why we defined also the different positions of the different actors on that circles. And I think both can have interesting information, or insights can have interesting information for you, and that we have to combine those insights and to make this more clear, because yeah, also for it's very interesting to see it, and that there are connections, but we can define it already very clearly.
Okay. Yeah, well, what I'm sure about already is it's not going to be a perfect match because we have a variety. We have the whole scope of profiles in different organizations. I think I'm not saying the people are maybe happy to be in the organization they are with their different profiles, but there's a mix within organizations.
All right. Thank you for that. I have a different question, and this is Wendy, for your decision tree with the ESG side and the impact side that's sort of designed for financiers. Can entrepreneurs use this same tree?
For me, it's I think so, because in fact, if investors are looking at those different aspects, but organizations are doing it as well. Because if an organization really is on the ESG side, they're really also looking, first of all, to their profit, and sometimes to what aspects. And then the second stage, they're looking at the environmental issues, how they can, how they have an effect on their profitability, but also how they have a negative influence on the environment. So for me, it's, in fact, you see a lot of investors, how they invest in companies, they also give some direction to those companies. So it's not only that the investors are applying those decisions, they're pushing the organization also in that direction. So they get similar discussions just from another perspective, but they are having those, the same discussions within those, within their teams.
I would say not only they can, but they should, because studies show that one reason why the match between an investor and an entrepreneur doesn't work is a non-alignment in terms of values, in terms of expectation of reporting on different SDGs and things like that. So yes, I think it could be a factor of success to have a better match there.
Yeah, and this is actually to the earlier CSRD and SFDR, the big question, like how will those two sort of complement each other? Because obviously by definition, financiers talk about their portfolio, and that's full of entrepreneurs or enterprises. So there must be an alignment there. But currently, also labels, but I'm going to promote this later, are very much along the lines of the financiers, and you have totally different labels and certifications for the entrepreneurs and their products. But I wouldn't be surprised if over the next few years this will merge a lot more, and a lot more alignments will be found, and a lot more clarity on how to measure this. But that's part of the topic of future webinars as well. Okay. In the I'm keeping an eye on my email. Everybody can see the chats. Will the final results be shared? Yes, the final results, as in. Sorry.
The
Cristel final result.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's an academic study, so the purpose is to publish it, and when you publish a study, it's public. Yeah.
Okay.
So
on,
yes,
on
absolutely.
how can we find it?
It depends on what journal it's published, but I am very sure that I will share it on social media and with IFB, and that you'll be able to distribute it to maybe through a newsletter or something like that. That could be
Impact Finance.
Good reason to sign up to the newsletter.
Oh, thank you for promoting our newsletter. Indeed, that's on our website. I have that on the list for later. The next question, Unverified Sarah asks, is there research to retail investors? And if so, are the results different from institutional investors? Or was this to Cristel and your questions, or maybe you covered this a bit already?
Our study is not conducted on retail investors, but you're right that other studies focus on retail investors and are quite different. I think the challenge for retail investors for the moment seems to be a lack of interest in sustainable investment. And I have to nuance that. There's a study showing that there's two groups of retail investors, one that's really not interested and one that's very interested, but for intriguing reasons, because it's part of their identity. It's being part of a club, like having a Fairphone and having a newbie bank card and things like that, and doing sustainable investment. So these are people who do sustainable investment because it's part of who they are and the group that they evolve with. And the people who this identity is not defined by sustainable investment are not interested in sustainable investment. These are results from about 3 years ago. It would be interesting to do a check to see if there's any evolution there, because we definitely need retail investors to increase their knowledge and interest for sustainable finance.
It's one of the lines of work we're looking at is how retail investors can be brought in more, and there are different ways of doing this, and we know some of our members are already pushing for this. And the answers are multifold, partly regulatory, partly information. There are different aspects to it, sometimes practical as well, of how this can be done. But it's really something IFB wants to look at is how to bring in more retail investing into this space, because there's so many limitations now. The easy example is fund managers that in Belgium typically have to work with a minimum amount of 250,000. which is not what the average Belgian can spend on this. So that really limits what can be done. And it would be great to have other ways through which smaller amounts could be brought in as well. Okay. In the emails, I received one question from somebody who is, I know, very active in this space, also with the GSD, the Global Steering Group, referring to Ronald Cohen, Sir Ronald Cohen, who often talks about impact measurements, that's crucial if you want to move from a standard ESG approach to really what can be called impact investing. The question is, do we agree that the difference between ESG and impact investing is rigorous measurements? Wendy?
Well, I think if you want to realize impact in the society, you also have the obligation to measure your impact. And what often is still done is that they measure outputs and not outcomes, so that we have to move also the bar to measure those outcomes and those impacts. It's just that there's a lot of different methodologies around, and that makes it sometimes difficult to make choices and to practice it. But I think, yeah, if you really want to create impact, you really need to know if you can if you create impact, and if that impact that you create is at least more positive than negative, like that we had it more in the traditional organization. So yeah, for me it's crucial. And yeah.
It's on your first page as well, which is page 6 or 7 here, with the GIN definition that we often quote, without saying that it's perfect, but it really helps, as it clearly states, in order to be classified as impact, there must be the intention to generate this. Because every entrepreneur, every person even generates impacts, positive or negative, but what I usually call sort of a side product. But if you really make an investment with the intention to achieve a certain financial return, and that's what most investors do, it's crucial to also include already your targets on the non-financials, typically environmental or social. So the intentionality is important. Then there are other aspects about additionality and about measurability that are important too, but some of these will be addressed in the next rounds. Webinars numbers 2 and 3 is where this will come up. So I would personally not totally agree with Ronnie by saying that just ESG and add rigorous measurements, that makes it impact investing. There's certainly a need to have the intention, and before you start, know what you're after, and then of course you also need to measure to check later how you're doing this, so you can also change your track. Okay, then there is one other question was not totally clear to me, so I asked for clarification, and I'll wait for that one. I have another question here that came in earlier about classic points. I'm not sure if that's totally the theme here. Financial return. Nice to talk about impacts, but what is the price of impacts? Do you have any info on this? Because that's the main reason why a lot of people are not into impacts, because they're afraid that it's going to cost them. Mm-hmm. It's not totally the theme of today, but I'm sure both of you have something to say about it.
Well, we can start by talking about the same debate exists in terms of sustainable finance. There's been a lot in the press recently as well about the cost of doing sustainable finance. There's been more than 2,000 academic studies trying to determine if sustainable finance costs you or if it gives you superior return, and nobody's happy with the results, in the sense that those who want to prove it brings you more can't, because there are studies that prove it does and studies that prove it doesn't. And meta studies, meaning studies about studies, conclude that you're not destroying value by doing sustainable finance, but you're not beating the market either. So proponents of sustainable finance are frustrated, and detractors of sustainable finance are frustrated as well. I think the selling point, the argument is not about return, which is actually similar. Now, your question was about return of impact investment. And I think the answer there is slightly different. It depends what type of impact investment you do, in what sector, at what level is it seed investment, and how risky it is. The rules of finance stay the same. There's a link between risk and return, and you need to take that into account in your investment decisions. That being said, I want to add, and that's more a personal conviction, if the purpose is to finance the transition, there's so many projects that are needed for society, for a just transition. and not all of those projects are provide market return. There's actually a study of a consultant that said that what was it, 60% of those projects don't provide market return for them, and these projects remain important. So the question is, how do we finance the projects that give below market return? Maybe some impact investors accept below market return, that the profile exists, we've seen it. Others don't accept it, and there'll have to be other products with that. But it also requires lots of innovation in the financing tools that we use, be it collaborations around financing tools, blended finance, some taking more risk and giving return to others, et cetera, et cetera. Because it's an illusion to think that all the projects we need for a sustainable and just future give market return.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, for those interested here, I'm going to do a little bit of promotion. Interested in this topic, how that translates into reality. Keep an eye on the website of Leuven 2030. So IFB is assisting Leuven 2030, where they did lots of good work over the past few years to identify how Leuven, the city of Leuven here in Belgium, could become climate neutral, with a long list of over 80 investments that would need to be done just to make the city climate neutral. But the challenge is, of course, that many of those investments are not financially interesting. And then we can get more technical, which I won't do here, but the challenge there is, how do you bring the different parties and streams of finance together to ensure that financially it is interesting for those who want it to be financially interesting, but that others can participate who have more of a non-financial focus or a mixed financial focus on this. So we really have live cases there that we're exploring now, and trying to link it to market parties, and to jointly work on impact in this particular case in Leuven. I know many other cities in Belgium are looking at similar approaches. It's fun to do. Check their website. Wendy.
I just wanted to add that even in the impact investors you make, there's a distinction between investors who are putting impact first and profit first. So you also see that there are some debates, and some they're just putting profit first because they really want to have their preservation of their capital. Sometimes they want to even go further. And so it's not always that clear, but you see that there is a split within those impact investors even.
You're making a little bridge maybe to the question by Orlando in the chat, and I may treat that as the last question because then we need a minute to round up. Asking about the relationship between the type and or magnitude of an organization, so basically about the organization, and its capacity to manage and profit from regulations according to impact investing. So regulations are changing, are in place. Oh, I even see a picture coming in now. Cristel is answering. Oh, you're a good academic. You throw in a full study immediately. Give us some background.
No, I think a good academic wouldn't throw you a whole study with all the pages to read, but summarize it in a few words. So I'll try to do that. So there's studies that show the very high cost of regulation. Basically, there's been an explosion in the number of regulations for the financial sectors in the past years, and that definitely leads to a cost, which the study analyzes. Now, and this is more intuition than facts because the study doesn't say it. Large actors will have the teams, the legal teams, compliance teams, etc., to deal with this type of regulation, whereas small actors don't have it. And whereas we've heard, and that was already the case 10 years ago, big banks complaining a lot about the weight of regulation, which I'm not questioning. I think this additional regulation is actually more favorable to big banks than to small actors because they can more easily comply with it than others could. Which is why maybe we need to be creative in finding solutions and, again, collaborate or have platforms or industry associations that help small actors understand and apply regulation. I think the FSMA does a job there too in explaining regulation to different actors.
Okay. I have a non-academic answer to this, and this is years of experience in developing countries with SMEs, microfinance, and so really the smaller end of the market. They typically knew far better, A, what they were doing, B, who they were reaching out to and C, therefore, what their impact was. It was typically the larger parties that were so distant from the real impacts that they had a harder time to really tell that story. So theoretically, rules and policies all in place, wonderful, but the translation to reality was surprising how well the SMEs and microfinance parties were able to do this. So this debate will continue, but I think there are wonderful examples out there. We are in our last minutes. I don't know if, Honey, you can bring up the page of the next few webinars, the last week of each month coming up. And this is also on our website. And this is our very last page then, to link it back to our websites and our email addresses for any further contacts and questions. I realized I was not able to cover each and every question, but I hope to give it a good mix. Thank you all for joining, all the callers that we don't see. And thank you very much to Cristel helping us today, and Wendy, and all your good work here. And I hope to see many of you back in the next series. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.